My name is Arya, and this is the story of how I destroyed my family's world without them ever seeing it coming. Another client rejection. The words sliced through the air like a blade, delivered by my brother Dante with that signature smirk that had haunted every family dinner for the past 5 years. His eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction as he leaned back in his chair, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. Maybe if you had gotten a real degree instead of that useless psychology PhD, you would have actual success to report at these monthly family dinners. I took a slow sip of wine, my hand remarkably steady despite the familiar burn of humiliation spreading through my chest. But tonight was different. Tonight, as I sat there absorbing their cruel words, I was thinking about the confidential merger documents sitting in my office safe. Documents that would determine whether his precious investment bank lived or died. Documents he had absolutely no idea I controlled. The irony was so delicious I almost choked on my wine. Psychology is fascinating, I replied quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. You would be surprised how much human behavior affects business decisions. Dante threw back his head and laughed, the sound echoing off the dining room walls like gunshots. Human behavior does not make money, Arya. Real success comes from practical degrees, my sister Valencia chimed in, adjusting her Rolex with deliberate precision. The watch caught the chandelier light, sending sparkles across the table like tiny accusations. Business, law, finance. That is what matters in the real world. If they only knew. If they only knew that my useless degree had built the most exclusive consulting firm in the country. That CEOs of Fortune 500 companies waited months for my approval on their biggest decisions. That their own company's fates rested entirely in my hands. But they did not know. And that ignorance was about to become their downfall. Speaking of success, my father began, launching into his usual parade of family achievements with the enthusiasm of a ringmaster. Dante just closed another billion-dollar deal at Goldman Sachs. And Valencia's firm is handling the Prestamirs merger, my mother added proudly, her chest swelling with maternal pride. The biggest corporate merger of the year. I hid my smile behind my wine glass, feeling the secret knowledge burn inside me like molten gold. They had no idea I was the anonymous consultant both companies had hired to evaluate the psychological viability of that very merger. The one I was likely going to reject tomorrow morning. The same merger that would make Valencia's career, or destroy it completely. What about you, Arya? Aunt Celeste asked with that fake concern that dripped like poison honey. Any progress with that consultation business of yours? It is going fine, I replied simply. Fine. Dante erupted into laughter, the sound harsh and grating. She probably has 2 clients who need help with their anxiety attacks. Meanwhile, I am handling real business. Billion-dollar acquisitions. International mergers. That is what success looks like. My phone buzzed quietly against my leg. A message from my executive assistant flashed across the screen. White House meeting confirmed for tomorrow. They want your assessment of the new economic advisory team. I kept my face perfectly neutral as I slipped the phone back into my purse. You know, Arya, Valencia leaned forward, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I had grown to despise. My firm is always looking for corporate counsel. Even with your unusual background, we might find something entry-level for you. I thought about the psychological profile I had compiled on her firm's managing partner just last month. The one he had paid 6 figures for. The same partner who had specifically requested my services after I had accurately predicted 3 major market shifts based on executive behavior patterns. I am happy with my current work, I replied, taking another sip of wine. What work? Dante snorted, his face flushed with wine and arrogance. Listening to people whine about their problems all day? That is not work. That is glorified therapy. The words hit me like physical blows, but I had learned to absorb them, to let them fuel the fire burning inside my chest. You would be amazed what people reveal when they talk, I said softly, my voice carrying a weight they could not possibly understand. Their fears, their plans, their vulnerabilities. Speaking of plans, my father interrupted, completely oblivious to the undercurrent of tension crackling through the air. Dante's team is finalizing that acquisition next week. The Anderson Group deal. Now that is real business. I kept my face neutral even as I recalled my morning meeting with Anderson Group's CEO. He had begged for my evaluation of Goldman's acquisition offer. My recommendation would land on his desk tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Reject the deal. Dante's team had missed every single critical psychological indicator in the corporate culture compatibility analysis. They were walking into a disaster and they had no idea. Arya, my mother sighed dramatically, placing her perfectly manicured hand over her heart. We just want you to reach your potential. All that education, and what do you have to show for it? I thought about my penthouse office overlooking Central Park. The waiting list of Fortune 500 CEOs desperate for my approval. The government contracts worth more than Dante's entire division's annual revenue. The private jet I actually owned, unlike Dante's company lease. I do all right, I said quietly. All right is not enough in this family, Dante declared, his voice rising with alcohol-fueled bravado. Look at my division's performance. $3 billion in deals this quarter alone. He paused dramatically, clearly expecting applause or admiration. And how is the Anderson acquisition going? I asked innocently, tilting my head slightly. Dante frowned, his confident expression flickering for just a moment. It is proceeding as planned. What? Just curious about human behavior patterns in high-stakes negotiations. Valencia rolled her eyes so hard I was surprised they did not fall out of her head. There you go again with the psychology nonsense. This is why you will never understand real business. My phone buzzed again. This time, the message made my pulse quicken. Urgent call from Preston Mears. Client wants to triple your fee for expedited merger evaluation. You know what your problem is, Arya? Dante pointed his fork at me like a weapon, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his glass. You are too passive. In real business, you have to be aggressive. You have to take what you want. I thought about how aggressively I was about to tank his Anderson deal, how the psychological incompatibility report would cite specific behavioral patterns his team had completely overlooked. Sometimes, I replied, my voice carrying a deadly calm, the quiet ones have the most power. Power? He laughed again, but this time there was something forced about it. Something almost desperate. You sit in an office listening to people talk about their feelings. That is not power, Arya. That is pity work. Tell me, Dante, I said, leaning forward slightly, my voice taking on a silky quality. How many of your deals require psychological compatibility assessments? He waved dismissively, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Some consultant nonsense the clients insist on. Complete waste of time and money. And who provides those assessments? Some top-secret firm the clients will not even tell us about. Probably overcharging them for basic. His voice trailed off as realization began to flicker across his face like the first flames of a house fire. My phone lit up again. This time it was Goldman Sachs requesting an urgent meeting. The subject line read, Anderson Group acquisition critical. Excuse me. I stood up gracefully, smoothing my skirt. I have a call to take. More anxiety clients? Valencia smirked, but there was something strained about her expression now. Something like that. I replied, walking toward our parents' study. As I closed the door behind me, I could hear their muffled voices continuing the conversation, probably dissecting my pathetic career and speculating about my mysterious phone call. Tomorrow, Dante would discover exactly who held the real power in his billion-dollar deals. His face would be absolutely priceless when the Anderson Group CEO quoted my psychological assessment as the primary reason for rejecting Goldman's offer. Sometimes the quiet ones do not just have power. They have everyone else's power too. They just do not feel the need to brag about it at family dinners. The next morning, I sat in my real office, a sprawling penthouse suite overlooking Central Park where CEOs and world leaders came to bare their souls and seek my approval. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in a golden glow that seemed almost prophetic. The walls were lined with advanced one-way glass, preserving client anonymity, while providing a perfect view of the city I had conquered without anyone knowing. Dr. Arya, my AI system Psyche announced in its smooth, sophisticated voice, Goldman Sachs arriving in 5 minutes. Dante Sullivan's team has requested to join the meeting. I smiled, adjusting my Chanel blazer, the same one Valencia had mockingly called assistant wear at dinner last night. Keep Dante's team in the secondary conference room, I instructed, my voice carrying the authority that came from years of controlling billion-dollar decisions. Let us see how long it takes them to realize where they are. My phone was buzzing incessantly with increasingly desperate messages from last night. Dante. Need urgent consult on Anderson Group. Client requesting specific psychologist sign-off. Valencia. Preston Mears merger stalled. Something about psychological assessment requirements. Father. Since when does Anderson Group need a psychologist's approval? I silenced the notifications as Goldman's CEO, Michael Preston, walked through my office doors. His body language screamed anxiety, shoulders tense like coiled springs, fingers drumming an unconscious rhythm, eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Dr. Sullivan, he began, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. We have a situation with the Anderson acquisition. I nodded calmly, settling back in my leather chair. I assume you have seen my preliminary assessment? He slumped into one of my carefully positioned client chairs, the weight of impending disaster visible in every line of his body. It is devastating. Your analysis of our corporate culture incompatibility, the predicted post-merger staff retention rates. It is all completely accurate, is it not? Psyche, display the compatibility matrices, I commanded. The wall transformed into a massive data display showing complex psychological patterns and behavioral predictions. 5 years of doctoral research had created this system, while my family mocked my waste-of-time degree. Your brother's team, Preston continued, his voice hollow with defeat. They missed everything you caught. The Anderson Group's dedication to autonomy, their collaborative decision-making style. It is completely incompatible with Goldman's current acquisition strategy. Speaking of my brother's team, I glanced at Psyche's security feed, watching the secondary conference room. They have just realized whose office they are in. The screen showed Dante and his team, their faces shifting from confusion to shock to something approaching horror as they recognized my name on the door plaques, the awards on the walls, the client testimonials they had somehow never connected to their failure sister. Send them in, I instructed, my pulse quickening with anticipation. Dante entered first, his usual swagger completely absent. He moved like a man walking to his execution, his face pale and drawn. Arya, he whispered, his voice barely audible. You are the consultant. Dr. Sullivan, Preston corrected sharply, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. Show some respect. She is the top corporate psychological profiler in the country. I watched my brother struggle to reconcile this reality with years of assumptions. His banking empire's fate was resting in his failure sister's hands, and the cognitive dissonance was written across his face in stark, brutal lines. But you just listen to people's problems, he stammered, his world tilting off its axis. No, Dante, I replied, my voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I analyze complex human behavioral patterns in high-stakes corporate environments. I predict merger success rates with 97% accuracy. I evaluate leadership compatibility and organizational psychology. I pulled up more data screens, each one displaying the depth and sophistication of my work. And right now, I am explaining why your acquisition strategy is fundamentally flawed from a psychological perspective. The Anderson Group deal is solid, he protested weakly, but his voice carried no conviction. The financials are perfect. Numbers do not account for human nature. I cut him off, my voice sharp as steel. Your aggressive acquisition style directly conflicts with their collaborative culture. Implementation would fail within 6 months, resulting in massive talent hemorrhaging and cultural collapse. Preston nodded grimly. Dr. Sullivan's previous predictions have been accurate to within 3%. Her assessment is final. Dante collapsed into a chair like a marionette with cut strings, his entire world reshaping itself around this new reality. How long, he whispered. How long have you been doing this? Remember when you mocked my first corporate client 5 years ago? I smiled and it felt predatory. Called it therapy for weak executives who could not handle real business pressure? He nodded numbly. That client was the Federal Reserve Chairman. Now I have a 3-month waiting list and a 7-figure consultation fee. 7 figures, he repeated, the words falling from his lips like stones. Per assessment. More for expedited services, I confirmed, turning back to Preston. Speaking of which, shall we discuss the alternative strategy one have prepared? My phone was buzzing again. Valencia, calling about the Preston Mears merger. The one she had no idea I was about to completely restructure. Psyche current client value assessment, I commanded. The AI's voice filled the room with devastating precision. Current confirmed clients represent 67% of Fortune 500 market capitalization. Waiting list includes 12 heads of state, 8 central bank governors, and the top 5 global investment banks. Dante's team shifted uncomfortably as they recognized names of deals they had worked on. Deals that had required my approval without them ever knowing it. Now, I turned back to Preston, my voice businesslike and efficient. About the Anderson Group. I have an alternative suggestion that would preserve both corporate cultures while achieving your growth objectives through psychological compatibility. Whatever you recommend, he agreed immediately, his relief palpable. Your track record speaks for itself. James watched in stunned silence as I restructured his billion-dollar deal into something completely different. His commission was about to vanish, but more importantly, his entire understanding of power and success was crumbling like ancient stone. One more thing, I added casually, as if discussing the weather. The Preston Mears merger, the one my sister's firm is handling. Preston nodded eagerly. What do you need to know? It needs a complete psychological reassessment. The current structure is psychologically unsustainable and will result in catastrophic organizational failure. I will call Valencia's managing partner immediately, he agreed without hesitation. Dante finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. All those deals, all those times clients insisted on special consultant approval. Were me, I confirmed, my voice carrying the weight of years of silent power. It turns out psychology is quite valuable in real business after all. An hour later, my office had become considerably more crowded. Valencia had arrived with her managing partner, both of them looking like they had seen ghosts. Their faces were ashen, their usual confidence completely shattered as they realized whose approval they had been desperately seeking for the Preston Mears merger. My father had come too, probably hoping to control what was rapidly becoming a complete shift in family power dynamics. Your latest assessment, Dr. Sullivan, Psyche announced, displaying new data matrices across the wall. Preston Mears merger shows 78% probability of cultural collapse within the first year. Recommendation: complete restructure or immediate termination. Valencia clutched her legal briefcase like a shield, her knuckles white with tension. This is impossible, she whispered. We have spent months on this merger. And missed every single psychological red flag, I noted calmly. Competitive internal cultures, conflicting leadership styles, incompatible decision-making processes. But the financials? Her managing partner started desperately. Mean nothing if the human elements fail, I interrupted. Psyche, show them the Harrison Webb merger from last year. The screens filled with data from a similar merger that had collapsed spectacularly. The one I had advised against. The one they had pursued anyway. Perfect financials, I explained, my voice carrying the satisfaction of vindication. Terrible psychological compatibility. $8 billion in shareholder value destroyed, because nobody listened to the useless psychologist. My father cleared his throat, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished. Arya, surely we can discuss this as a family. Like you discuss my career choices as a family? I turned to face him, years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. All those dinners mocking my degree, my work, my choices. How is that working out for you now? Dante had not spoken since Goldman Sachs left. He was staring at the client list displayed on one wall. A Fortune 500 who's who of companies that would not make major moves without my approval. Psyche, I called, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. Current success rate of endorsed ventures. 97.8% success rate over 5 years. The AI responded with mechanical precision. Ventures rejected or restructured by Dr. Sullivan show 89% failure rate when pursued against recommendation. Valencia's managing partner pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I need to call the Preston Mears board immediately. Dr. Sullivan, can we retain you for a full assessment? My next available appointment is in 3 months, I replied smoothly, unless you would like to discuss expedited services. Whatever it costs, he agreed quickly, desperation bleeding through his professional facade. Speaking of costs, Dante finally spoke, his voice hoarse. How much? How much do you actually make? I smiled and it felt like victory. Psyche, display annual revenue. The number appeared on screen, causing Valencia to actually choke on her water. It was more than her law firm made in 5 years. More than Dante's division generated in profit. More than they had ever imagined possible. That is just the corporate work, I added casually. Government contracts are considerably more lucrative. Government contracts? My father asked weakly. Why do you think I miss so many family dinners? I turned to Valencia specifically. Remember last month when you mocked me for canceling Sunday dinner? I was consulting with the Federal Reserve Chairman on interest rate psychological impacts. The room fell into absolute silence as years of assumptions crumbled like ancient ruins. The sound of their worldview shattering was almost audible. Dr. Sullivan, Psyche announced. The White House is holding on line 1 regarding tomorrow's economic advisory assessment. My family stared in collective shock as I took the call, discussing global financial psychology with the president's chief of staff, like it was a casual conversation about the weather. After I hung up, Valencia spoke first, her voice small and broken. Why did you never tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked simply. Besides, watching you all assume I was failing while I built this empire. It was quite the fascinating psychological study in family dynamics and assumption bias. About the Anderson deal, Dante started, his voice pleading. Is dead. I confirmed without mercy. But I have prepared an alternative strategy. One that might save your reputation, if not your commission. And the Preston Mears merger? Valencia's managing partner asked desperately. Needs to be completely restructured, I replied. I will have my team send over the preliminary psychological requirements. Valencia can handle the legal framework, assuming she is willing to actually listen to her failure sister. My father stood up straighter, slipping into his business mode like armor. Perhaps we should discuss how to integrate your expertise into the family's business interests. No need. I smiled, the expression predatory and satisfied. I already control most of them. Those psychological assessments your companies have been requiring? They all come through my firm. I have been directing the family's business success for years. You just did not know it. I walked to the window, looking out over the city where I had built my silent empire. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room. And for a moment, I felt like a queen surveying her conquered kingdom. It is fascinating, really, I said, my back still to them. A perfect case study in assumption bias and psychological blindness. You were all so convinced of what success looked like, you missed it standing right in front of you. Arya, my father said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years of regret. I was wrong. Yes, I replied simply, turning back to face them. You were. Psyche, show them the family investment analysis. The screens displayed how my psychological insights had secretly shaped our family's business success over the years. Which deals I had quietly guided toward success. Which disasters I had silently averted. How many times their victories had actually been mine. Now, I said, settling back into my chair like a throne. Shall we discuss how this changes our monthly family dinners? Later that night, as I sat in my private study reviewing potential client files, my phone filled with messages. The tone had changed completely from mockery to desperate pleading. Aunt Celeste. Darling, about that business advice I mentioned. Cousin Marcus. Any chance of moving up the consulting waiting list? Mother. We should have listened. We should have seen. I archived them all without responding, then opened my calendar to schedule next month's family dinner. Instead of the usual location at my parents' house, I booked a private room at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The one I owned. The irony was perfect. They would sit in my restaurant, eating food paid for by my success, finally understanding that their failure sister had been the puppet master all along. But as I sat there in the silence of my penthouse office, looking out over the city lights that sparkled like stars, I realized something profound. This was not really about revenge. It was about validation. It was about finally being seen for who I truly was. For years, I had absorbed their criticism, their dismissal, their casual cruelty. I had let them define my worth based on their limited understanding of success. But all the while, I had been building something far more powerful than their conventional achievements. I had built an empire of influence that stretched across continents. World leaders called me for advice. Trillion-dollar decisions hung on my psychological assessments. I held the power to make or break the largest corporations in the world. And I had done it all while they laughed at my useless degree. The next morning brought a flood of new messages. Business contacts who had heard about yesterday's revelations through the corporate grapevine. Clients eager to curry favor now that they knew about my family connections. Competitors trying to understand how they had missed such a massive player in their industry. But the most satisfying message came from an unexpected source, the Anderson Group CEO. Dr. Sullivan, after reviewing Goldman's revised proposal based on your alternative strategy, we are prepared to move forward. Your brother's team will be handling the implementation, but under your psychological framework. This is brilliant work. Dante's career was saved. Not because of his aggressive tactics or his billion-dollar swagger, but because his failure sister had redesigned his deal from the ground up. The Preston Mears merger was restructured within the week. Valencia's firm received full credit for the legal work, but every aspect of the deal flowed from my psychological compatibility assessment. At our next family dinner, the dynamic had shifted so completely it felt like entering an alternate universe. They hung on my every word. They asked about my work with genuine curiosity instead of mocking dismissal. They treated me like the expert I had always been. But somehow, the victory felt hollow. Years of craving their respect and recognition. And now that I had it, I realized it had come too late. I no longer needed their validation. I had built something far more valuable than their approval. I had built my own definition of success. As I sat at the head of the table in my own restaurant, watching my family struggle to reconcile their assumptions with reality, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This was what I had wanted for so long. To be seen, to be recognized, to have my achievements acknowledged. But in getting everything I thought I wanted, I had discovered something profound about the nature of power and family, and the price of silence. Sometimes the most important victories are the ones nobody sees coming. Sometimes the quiet ones do not just have power. They are power, moving through the world like invisible forces, shaping outcomes from the shadows. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well, building something magnificent, and letting others slowly discover just how magnificent it truly is. As for my family, they learned that night that success is not always loud. It is not always obvious. Sometimes it wears a modest dress and drives a practical car, and sits quietly at family dinners, absorbing criticism while controlling the fate of empires. They learned that the sister they had dismissed as a failure had become the most successful person in the room. That her useless psychology degree was the foundation of an empire built on understanding the one thing that truly drives all human endeavor: the complexity of the human mind. And they learned that sometimes, the most dangerous person at the table is not the one making threats. It is the one taking notes. I still attend the monthly family dinners. But now when I sit at that mahogany table, I do not sit as the failure sister with the useless degree. I sit as Dr. Aria Sullivan, the woman who controls more corporate destiny than anyone else in the room. And when they look at me now, they do not see someone to pity or dismiss. They see someone who has mastered the most valuable skill in any business: understanding exactly what makes people tick. The quiet ones, it turns out, really do have all the power. They just do not feel the need to brag about it at family dinners. If this story of hidden success and family vindication resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of triumph over adversity. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because everyone deserves to see how the underestimated can rise to control empires while the world sleeps. Your support means everything to us. And there are so many more shocking stories waiting to be told.